Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Ask Artna. I am your host Artna Maheshwari. I help coaches, consultants, freelancers build and scale their online business. In this episode, we'll be going to talk to Jack, who is a Devon football player turned a writer and a podcaster. He talks about self-improvement, psychology, and mindset. You can also connect with him on his podcast, the Jack Moses podcast, which is available on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. The links are in the description. So now let's all welcome Jack.
Okay, yeah. I'm Jack. I'm a junior at Northwestern. I'm studying psychology and entrepreneurship. I'm 21 years old, and I just started getting into the online creator space about 4 or 5 months ago. I started writing a newsletter back in July just for fun, and I kind of stumbled down the slippery slope in terms of Twitter, podcast, newsletter, and here I am today. So I appreciate you having me. This is gonna be fun.
Thank you so much for taking our time from your schedule. And guys, he is a gold mine of amazing content on Twitter. If you're not following him, you're missing out on so much. So, Jack, tell me, how did you get started with Twitter and what was your journey like?
Yeah, so it actually goes back before Twitter, the original story. So I was going through a transition period in my life, and I was going from a pretty big athlete, like a American football player, to now not being an athlete. And I decided to backpack through Europe with a friend this summer. And it was like the first time I was really out of my environment and out of my comfort zone in a long time. And so I discovered this weird love for writing. And so
Mm.
I started writing everything I was doing in a journal, and I had written like 200 pages in a journal in a couple months. And some kid I met in Europe asked me, he's like, "Are you a writer?" And I was like, "No, I'm not a writer." And he's like, "You should consider being a writer. You just wrote 200 pages." And I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting. Maybe I should." So after that, I started writing these weekly newsletters to my family and friends, just for fun, like 10 people, really no goal out of it, just doing it because I kind of enjoyed it. Just like self-improvement, health tips, like life advice, just stuff I thought was interesting. And then from there, I kind of just stumbled down this writing slippery slope, and I found people on Twitter like Dickie Bush and Dan Coe and Dakota Robertson, and I saw what they were doing, and I'm like, dang, this is really cool. And it seems like it's something that is attainable. And so I was like, I'm gonna start writing on Twitter. And since then it's just kind of compounded.
Awesome, awesome. And even we met on Twitter and we started talking and then we interacted with each other's tweets. And if Twitter wasn't there, Twitter is a great platform for anybody who wants to write and take on writing as a career. And I think Jack is the right person to talk about it. But for my limited knowledge and limited journey on Twitter, I find like people are really eager to help you out if you're just ready to
Mhm.
put in the work.
Yeah, for sure. I would totally second that. I mean, like we're connecting across the world because of Twitter, right? And it's like it's the greatest networking app I think out there. LinkedIn is also great for like more professional people, but for like the young hustling entrepreneurs out there, I think like Twitter is the space to be. And you're literally one message away from anybody in the world. Like that's the craziest thing. So and also I think you're doing something really smart with this podcast. Like having a podcast is the ultimate hack because now you have instant access to anybody pretty much that is willing to come on. So, and it's like, it's just an excuse to have a cool conversation for an hour. So I do the same thing.
True. So, I mean, like, if I had to write a letter to myself, maybe 5 years ago, I would have written all these things. Like, these were the cool things I wanted to try and meet these amazing people across the world. And Twitter and LinkedIn and this podcast is a great place to have that. So, Jack, apart from that, like, who's just getting started, if they can take notes from your journey, what points would you highlight to find their tribe or to find their audience?
In terms of like writing on Twitter in particular,
Yeah.
I would say just post every single day. Like if you just show up every single day for a couple months, like you'll start to figure it out. What I'll say about Twitter is it's kind of like a game. So, and it's a game in a sense of like you figure out what starts to work, what doesn't work, why certain people are growing, why you aren't growing. And you can kind of use every single post as like an experiment. So, if you post something and it gets no engagement, you can just take that as data, and you can do the same with a good post. Let's say you have a post that actually like kind of goes viral, or like you're just starting off, but it gets a couple likes. Even a couple likes is data. It shows that,
Yeah.
oh, somebody's interested in this. So I think trying to use your posts as data points and experiments rather than being attached to the outcome, because it's really easy to get discouraged at the start when you put a tweet out there and like nobody likes it. Like you're just sending it out into the universe and nobody even cares. And that can be a bit discouraging at first, but I would say the number one thing is like detach from that. Just post every day and don't even care if people are seeing it or not. Now, do care in the sense like you want to use it as data, but don't attach your emotions to it. Like live a life outside of Twitter.
Yeah. And also like one key hack is also something like if somebody is engaging on that particular post, you can also pin that tweet at the top so that it gets more engagement on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So like how did you want to create just content on Twitter? Are you just repurposing content or are you specifically creating content for Twitter?
Yeah, so it's so strange. Like I'm constantly thinking of ideas throughout my day. And so like the biggest, I guess, productivity or like note-taking hack that I've done is I have this little tab on my phone. Like I can just click on it and instantly start typing. It's like a quick capture through
Mhm.
Notion that I use. And so throughout my day, like if I get any idea that comes up that I think could be a tweet or like could be a thread or could be an email or podcast, I'll just write it down and I'll come back to it later. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Rick Rubin and Andrew Huberman, and he was like, the number one most important thing any creative can do is make sure that they capture like every single idea that they have. Now,
Mhm.
are you going to use every idea that comes up throughout the day? No. But if you can only use 10% of those ideas, like that is a lot of content right there. Like you have
Mhm.
thousands of ideas a day. So having a system where you can just capture ideas and then have a system where you go back to it at a later point and like type out, okay, will this actually be a good idea or not? It's something
Yeah.
that's been big for me.
Also, I was following Vanessa Lau's newsletter, and one of the key things that she also mentioned that she converts her podcasts into emails, and a shorter form of that is Twitter threads. So she is
Mm-hmm.
repurposing it across all the platforms, which is a very smart hack to follow.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. I have not really done that myself, but kind of in that same way, like when you're consuming a lot of content, or even if you're creating content in the form of like podcasts or books or long form videos, like that's where the real gems lie in terms of like coming up with new ideas. It's hard, at least for me. I don't know if it's the same. I'm curious if it's the same for you, but it's hard for me to come up with ideas when I'm like just scrolling Instagram or Twitter. But when I'm listening to like a podcast or like reading a book, ideas start to flow. It's like the longer the form of the content, like the easier it is to come up with ideas. Do you feel that
Yeah.
at all?
Actually, I love reading books. So when I
Mhm.
read books, it's like active imagination, and
Yes.
then you think a lot. Also, some sort of like putting up all the pieces together. So you are more creative in that process. And secondly, at the gym, I'm most creative at the
Yes.
gym.
Yes,
So
definitely. It's kind of when like your mind is in this creative state and you can just let it wander. Whereas like when you're consuming and like stimulating your mind every second with a new post, it's hard like to get that creative bandwidth and energy. But I'm the same way as you. Like I love my books and I love the gym. Those are my two favorite places in the world.
I still don't know the exact reason for it, but like after 30 minutes into the gym or exercising, something just hits and you get in that zone, and then
Yeah.
ideas keep flowing.
Yeah, it's like the same as writing too. Like you kind of have to warm up into it and like another thing, Andrew Huberman's on my head right now. I don't know why, but he talks about limbic friction, and what he means by that is like switching from one state to the next. So like going from resting to the gym, like it's really hard to just like instantly be in the zone and like be sweating and like super pumped up. You kind of need that time to get into the flow. And the same goes for writing, same goes for like podcasting and having a conversation, I think too. So it's like allowing yourself that time to like get into it. And if you can shorten that time, I think that's a really, really powerful tool. Now, I don't really know how to do that, but like I think caffeine and like loud music in the gym can definitely help.
I mean, people who keep writing, they say that writing, if you keep writing every single day, I think
Mm-hmm.
that will just decrease that particular time.
Definitely, definitely. That momentum picks up. It's like a muscle, honestly. Like in the gym, if you go every day, like you're going to be used to it. Same goes with writing. Same goes with even podcasting. Now, I don't know anybody that does a podcast every day. Like that'd be pretty intense.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be the same thing. Like if you just show up every single day and write or podcast, go to the gym every day, it starts to get easier over time. Once you get momentum, like stuff becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. So how would you classify your content strategy like in like actionable steps?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing for me in terms of like my strategy is always trying to stay 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the current date. So like right now today, I think it's February 3rd. I have like tweets and threads scheduled for myself through like the end of the month, through the end of February. And the reason I do that is to hedge against life coming up, life situations, burnout, school, like we all have these things going on. And like for somebody starting on Twitter, like Twitter is a small part of your life at first. It becomes bigger as you start growing, which is like maybe it's positive and a negative. But for me, like staying ahead of the game, using tweet schedulers, like I use Hype Theory, like no sponsorship, but I use Hype Theory. And so I try to just stay ahead of the game, and then it just takes stress off my shoulders, knowing like, you know what, if for some crazy reason, like I can't write it all tomorrow, I'm still covered. I still have 5 tweets going out. So I'd say like that's my number one key strategy.
Okay, so like if you had to write tweet for say 3 weeks down the line, what kind of tweets would you bifurcate your content into?
Yeah, so that's where this idea catching kind of comes into play. So like I don't know, let's say today I'm going on the train down to a coffee shop in San Francisco, and just an idea comes in my head. Like maybe like 5 steps to like a good morning. I don't know, this is just an example. And it
Yeah.
comes in my head. I'll just write it on my phone in my notes app, but I won't schedule it. Then when I get to the coffee shop, like I'll sit down and I'll have like 20 or 30 tweets like written in my notes, like like very sloppy, like not very well formatted, but just really ideas, like ideas that I had. And then I'll come back and like actually curate and edit those and try to like make them into formatted, like well thought out tweets.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
like if somebody had to start today, what kind of posts would you recommend them to start their content with?
I'd say write about whatever interests you, or else you're gonna burn out. Because when we try to like place ourselves into these buckets, like, oh, like I only write about copywriting, or I only write about like sales funnels. Like, let's be honest, like who's really, really, really passionate about that? I mean, it is a really valuable, those are valuable skills for sure. And maybe writing about them is good for to be perceived as an authority within Twitter. But I would say write about whatever interests you. If you're interested in sports, write about sports. If you're interested in fitness, write about fitness. If you're interested in, I don't know, psychedelics, write about psychedelics. Like write about something that's going to ensure that you're going to show up every day, because I think that's the most
Mm.
important thing is just consistency.
You know, I read this very beautiful hack about reading books. So if you're just getting started with reading books, just read about the topics that you really love about, say football. Start reading about
Yeah,
football. And then once you get hooked to the idea of books, go to the classics then.
exactly. 100%. Like that's exactly how you should explore writing or reading or anything, just following your curiosity. Naval talks about that a lot. Like just read about whatever you're interested in and don't feel like you even have to finish a book. And that's been something that I've actually been like kind of tweaking. I used to feel like I had to finish every single book I started, or I'd feel guilty. But now I'm just like bouncing from book to book. I have like probably 20 books I'm reading at once. And not to say that like, damn, I'm reading a lot, but it's like I'll read like 5 pages and then I'll switch. Like my
Mm.
attention's kind of diverted. And I don't know, maybe that's a bit too short, but I'm curious, like, do you work the same way in terms of reading? Like, do you bounce around?
Yeah, I do. So I've set a particular day. So it's Sunday, I'm not working. So set a day
Okay.
for reading. So whatever vibe that I'm in, I pick up that kind of book and just read it till the point I'm interested in, and I just leave. And then at the end of the day, I reflect of what I learned from that book. And it really helps me put that knowledge through in life.
I like that a lot. So you set aside like one whole day of the week just to read?
No, not a complete day, like half day. I would set aside for reading, and rest half of the day I'll be like sleeping, lying around, talking to friends, just regaining that energy back.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually love that framework. Like one day just to yourself. Like that's a cool way to look at it.
Earlier, I used to feel burnt out in like 3 months or so after continuously working. So I set myself a schedule to take myself off from work, and that is how I like fill my cup up again.
Yeah, yeah, you need that time to like really reset your energy and regain that momentum for the next week. It's it's easy to burn out when you never give yourself a chance to rest and recover. And like everybody's different, but I'm kind of the same as you. Like I need a day where I just kind of like sit around and read and just like reflect and gain perspective. Like I can go for like maybe a couple weeks at a time, but I need that reset. I need that time to myself to like really regain energy.
Awesome. High five. So, okay. So I just wanted to point it out. Like, if somebody is just getting started, I think building their profile in public is something that they can go ahead with. I think
Mhm.
making mistakes is okay as long as you're sharing your personal experiences on your Twitter feed. I think that brings in some sort of authenticity. And if nothing works, shit posting works the best.
No, really, like a lot of my friends in the ghostwriting space, like they shit post so much and it gets such good engagement, but it also fits so well with their personality. Like
Hmm.
Dakota has like almost 200,000 followers and he just shit posts about pineapple pizza. Like, and people love him for it, right? Because when you're being your authentic self, like that's where people really love you. Anybody can write about like how to build a good body or like how to do better at copywriting or something. Like anybody can do that. Chat GPT can do that. AI
Oh
can do
my
that.
God.
So
Yeah.
like what separates you from the rest? And it's like your unique personality. And so like if you can lean into that, maybe it's shit posting, maybe it's not, but whatever it is for you, like just bring your authentic self to the table.
So, what are the some of the similarities that you can draw from football and writing?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. They're so different because like football is so physically demanding, whereas writing is like you're just sitting down and just like typing and it's so mentally demanding. I'd say like the one similarity or like thing I try to use from football to writing now is just like showing up every day and the discipline of it. Like if you're gonna get good at football, you have to show up every day, especially when you don't feel like it. Like that's the thing. Like in comparison, writing is a lot easier than playing football because like in football, you have to wake up at 5 a.m. like in the middle of the winter to go lift weights like with a bunch of insanely talented guys and just like get your ass kicked at practice like every single day at 5 a.m. Like nobody wants to do that. And so on a lesser scale, like nobody wants to wake up every day at 6 a.m. and go to write at a coffee shop for 3 hours. Like that sounds like a lot of work, but when I try to keep it in perspective, like, okay, this is significantly easier than what I was doing with football. So I think like those habits and those character traits, like they definitely carry over very well.
Hmm. So, one thing that I've personally observed while writing is it drains you out a bit. It takes away a piece of you. Yeah. So
Mhm.
how do you fill yourself up again?
Caffeine. No. Um, yeah, I think no, in all honesty, like caffeine does really help in terms of like consistency and writing output. And it's something I like. I love writing with caffeine. It's just like it's such a fun thing for me. Like a cup of coffee or like a monster, like, and then I go to a coffee shop, put on my headphones, listen to music and write. Like it feels like I'm playing a video game. It doesn't feel
Mm.
like work. But I would say, you said like, how would I fill my cup? So I think like a big thing for me is past a certain time at night, let's say like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, after I eat dinner, like I'm turning my phone off, I'm turning my computer off, I'm turning everything off and just detaching from Twitter and from everything and work. And I'm just using that time for myself. So like for a couple hours every night, I'm just totally detached from the world and it's just me. Or like I'm hanging out with my roommates or I'm hanging out with some of my friends from school. And so I think just learning how to like separate work and play is so important. There's this guy I really like. I'm sure you've heard of him, Sahil Bloom. He's a writer on Twitter, and he talks about this thing called the power down ritual,
Okay.
where at a certain time, like you literally like it's kind of cheesy, but he'll be like power down, and he'll like close his computer, turn off his phone, and so in that way, like you can be fully present in your work when you're working on it, but then you're also fully present when resting. And it's not like you have this split attention,
Mm.
like, oh, I'm half working, half resting. Like that's going to lead to burnout. So I think a really big thing is being able to separate those two different states.
Hmm. So, just while you were sharing your experience, I just got a question, which is like, do you set specific time for yourself wherein you have to gain experience in that particular part of the day so that you can write about it later?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't like specifically like set a time to make sure like, okay, I need to like consume some content so I could write. It's just kind of a natural thing. Like when I'm commuting to class or like if I have some time to myself or even like in the gym if I'm listening to a podcast, like I'm just always curious about something. And so I just try to lean into that curiosity and not force it. I think that's the biggest thing. Like when you force consumption in terms of like I need to consume some content so I can have ideas. Like creativity can't be forced. Like it has to kind of flow out of this natural state. And so that's why it's like pursue your curiosity just freely and then ideas will magically come to you.
Sure. Okay. So, like, if realistically, if somebody were to ask you, how much time would it take to to say go from 0 to 1,000 followers on Twitter, what would you tell them?
It's hard to say. And it depends on how much input you're willing to put in. Like if you write a thread a day, like a really high performing thread a day for 30 days, like you can get to 1,000 followers probably in a month from zero.
Hmm.
But the thing is, the catch is you're not going to know how to write a high performing thread at first. Like it takes time. Like you
Hmm.
have to kind of like figure it out as you go. So I mean, this is kind of like not exactly answering your question, but I would say just detach from the amount of followers and detach from like the amount of likes and retweets, like I said, and like just focus on what you can do every day to get a little bit better. And over time, like the followers will take care of itself. It's like James Clear talks about it a lot in Atomic Habits. It's like set process goals and not end goals. Like I do have a follower goal number that I'm like aiming to hit because I think it's good to aim at something.
Yeah.
But you need to break that down into like, okay, like that's kind of out of my control. Like 1,000 followers, like that's not actually directly in my control. What is in my control? And it's like I can show up and write every day. I can learn something new every day, etc. So I'd say like maybe shift the focus from the number of followers to like the number of inputs you can do every day.
Got it. So, if you had to like weigh down the importance of writing every single day versus engaging every single day, how would you weigh them?
Yeah, I think at first it's really important to engage with people and make friends. Because like to think you can like grow an account by yourself, it's pretty ignorant. And I used to think that at first that I could just grow by myself, but like you need friends to give you advice or to help you along. And so at the start, like I was hopping on so many calls. Like I was hopping on like 15 or 20 calls a week, like no agenda, but just to meet people on Twitter, like in the low follower range, like a couple hundred followers. And we just talk about like, what are you trying to do on Twitter? How are you planning to grow? And you just start to hear all these new perspectives and it helps you gain clarity on your vision. Now, I would say like once you start to figure it out, like shift more from the engaging networking to now like focus on what you're doing every day, focus on your inputs and your writing, because that's when you're going to get the most returns. At the start, you get the returns from the network. At the end, you do too, once you have the network built, but like you need to put in the work, I would say, on a daily basis, writing, like especially once you have the network.
Yeah. And what role does DMs play on Twitter?
Yeah, DMs are huge. I mean, like we're going on this podcast because of DMs, right? Like, and the thing with DMs is these accounts that you kind of look up to or idolize in a sense. Like I used to
Mhm.
look up to Dakota and like idolize Dakota. Um, but then you realize through the DMs, like you're actually just one message away. And if you
Yeah.
give value in a DM or like genuinely have a question and they can respond to it quickly, like they'll probably respond. Like I try to respond to everybody because like even though I have like some sort of followers right now, like I had 1,000 a month ago. It's not like I'm any different than the people that are DMing me. It's just like I have a different number attached. So I'd say like shoot your shot, like DM everybody. You're gonna send some cringy DMs at first. Like looking back, like some of these DMs I sent to like Dan Coe and like Dakota, like I was just so desperate and just so ignorant. But like it's kind of like the price you have to pay, because then through those DMs you make friends, you network, you hop on calls. Like it's important for sure.
And then later, when you look back, they make amazing gold mine of content. This is
Oh,
what you started
exactly.
from.
Exactly. And then you can like if once you become friends with them, like Dakota and I are sort of friends now, but like I would laugh at like this dumbass DM I sent to him like months ago, be like, dude, I was such an idiot. So it's funny, but I'd say like don't feel ashamed of sending them. Like send as many as you can.
So, how do you take audience from Twitter to other platforms or say to your funnel?
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best person to speak on that yet because I haven't done it, but I've seen how other people do it and I plan on doing it. But think of Twitter as like your top of funnel content. So it's like a content that the masses can see. So like if you write a viral thread and a couple 100,000 people see it, like then from there you can link them to like your newsletter or something. Or in your newsletter, you can link them to like a YouTube channel or podcast. So all the different social medias can kind of work together eventually to get to like maybe you're selling a product or maybe you're selling coaching. But Twitter and like Instagram and TikTok are kind of those like top of funnel tools. Um, but yeah, I haven't really brought people to other platforms that much. I'm doing it with my newsletter, but in terms of like Instagram or YouTube, it's still pretty new for me. So, a good strategy that a lot of people talk about is like focus on one at the start and get really good at it. Then it's easy to bring people to other platforms, but trying to do like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter all at once is like really hard. Like you have to figure out one and then you pivot.
So, okay. So, what your end product is like? What are you at the end trying to sell, which you're making this funnel for?
Mm-hmm. So for me right now, I don't have anything like I'm selling. I'm more so just focused on like growing an audience, like building a brand. And right now I'm doing ghostwriting. So I'm writing for like founders and CEOs and people trying to go personal brands. And my long-term plan is to like use the money from that freelancing service and like funnel it back into myself and my own brand. Um, Eventually, like I've had ideas about potentially launching like a community of like young men like on self-improvement or like a cohort or a program based around like fitness or like holistic self-improvement. Now, like I'm still not there yet. These are all just ideas, but like I could see that down the line.
Okay. And what, like, when was the first time that you sent out your newsletter to your audience? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was scary as shit. Like it was so scary. And people probably thought I was so weird. So it was actually when I was in Europe this summer, so end of July, I was uh I was experiencing this phenomenon where I would like be really disciplined and hardworking, like Monday through Thursday, but I would start to fade in the weekend. And I heard Andrew Huberman again. I'm obsessed with this guy, clearly. He talked about this thing called like weekend drift. He said it once in a podcast. I was like, I love that term. And so I was like bored on a 9 hour train ride from Madrid to Paris. Super weird. And I just wrote about like this concept called weekend drift, about how like my priorities seem to shift in the weekend from like really hardworking discipline to like degeneracy, like partying. And I was like, how do I combat this? And so I thought other people might find it interesting. So I sent it to like my parents and like my grandparents and my cousins and like five of my good friends. I sent them a text. I was like, yo, this is really weird, but like, would you be interested in getting an email from me like every Thursday? And they're like, some of them were like, no, like what the like that's weird, which was like embarrassing and it felt shitty. But others were like, yeah, like why not? That'd be cool. And so from there, like the first week I had like 8 people read it. And then the next week I had like 12 people read it. And then like 15. And then I started sending more texts and be like, hey, would you be interested? And then like 30. And then now it's like almost at like 400 readers, which is like crazy given all like I had no goals when I started it. But to answer your question, it was like back in late July. I'm pretty sure it was back in late July. And then it's been like every Thursday since.
Awesome, awesome. So the reason why I asked this question is because a couple of days back I launched like my newsletter and I sent it across to a couple of subscribers, and it
Yeah.
felt like I'm just giving away a part of my knowledge, a part of me to somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was so exhilarating at a point, like how many people read it, how many people like how many people it got delivered. And it was amazing, amazing.
Yeah. It's such a vulnerable thing to do, to share your thoughts with the world. And like at first, it's very scary because it's like these people have this perception of me, and now I'm like showing them more and more. And you're like, damn, I wonder what they're going to think. But props to you for sending it. Like, all it takes is like one email. And then from there, like, if you just stay consistent, you have no idea how it could change your life. So props to you for like taking that step. That's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, couple of quick questions. How do you position yourself as an authority on Twitter? Like, what are the key elements for it?
Yeah, so that's something I'm still working around. Like, this is where having a specific skill or knowledge really comes into play. So let's say like you're a fitness guy on Twitter. Like your specific knowledge will come from your experience, and basically you'll be credible because of who you are. So like if you're a fitness guy talking about like all these things to get in shape, but you're not in shape, like you have no credibility. So you have to like practice what you preach. Something that I'm still working with is like, what am I going to be an authority in? I'm interested in like men's mental health. I'm interested in self-improvement. I'm interested in psychology and mindset and spirituality and all this stuff. But it's like, what am I really going to be perceived as that authority in? And I think it's something that I'm working through. I think it's hard to know at first, like what exactly your niche should be. But if you already have an experience, like let's say you're already a personal trainer, like you have expertise in that field. And all you have to do is teach people a couple steps behind you. You don't have to like be the master in the entire world of fitness to be a fitness coach. You just have to teach people that are a little bit behind you. That's all it is. So to answer your question, like I think for me, it's going to be self-improvement, men's self-improvement. Um, but I also recognize like I don't know enough about it yet to be perceived as an authority. And maybe that's just a limiting belief. But like, yeah, this is interesting for me to talk through. But yeah, that's something definitely to think about. How about
Um,
you? Have you thought about that for yourself?
I think sharing my journey on Twitter is
Mm-hmm.
something that I strongly believe in. It's something that I can authentically come across as this is something I tried, this has worked, and this is something that you can try on your own as well. Number
Yeah,
one. Second is sharing like real life case studies and testimonials, I think that can come across as something which makes you an expert in that field.
totally.
Um, yeah, I think case studies are in depth and they can really help in building this thing because I've used the same concept on Instagram and this has really helped in as carousels on Instagram. So I think
Mm.
they can translate well as Twitter threads.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think you're right on with like people really resonate with personal stories because it makes you relatable. Like if you're
Yeah.
just this, I'm using fitness because it's an easy example, but if you're just this like really like in shape person and somebody who's not in shape sees you, they're like, oh, that's impossible. I can never do that. But if you show the transformation of like, I used to be this, now I'm this, here's how I did it, then you bridge
Hmm.
that gap for that person. You take that person from this state of, oh, I'm not as good as I'd want to be, to like, oh, this is actually possible. So I think the stories are huge.
Do you think, like, when you talk about self improvement, productivity is a subset of it, right? So, do you think you can double down to that and grow your personal account based on just productivity?
I think you could. The reason I don't is I don't want to like pigeonhole myself into one thing. Like productivity is just like kind of like you said, it's like a small part of self-improvement, but I don't want to be like the productivity guy. Now because there's already people out there like that. Like Joey Justice is on Twitter. He's really good with this stuff.
Okay.
I kind of feel like I'd just be another one of him if it was just productivity. But I
Hmm.
think you can use these subsets in terms of like your overall holistic brand because as people we're so like multifaceted and we have so many different dimensions to us, so it's hard to like say like I'm this or I'm that. And I think also it's a bit limiting in the long run, like if you
Yeah.
assign an identity over yourself. Like I used to only be a football player. Like I would have never considered writing or reading or podcasting because I had this identity that was limiting me. So I think having one identity that kind of limits your scope of what you talk about on Twitter or anything, like I think in the long run, it might not be the smartest move.
Okay. Tell me honestly, how much time do you spend on Twitter?
A day? That's a good question. I think I'm at my best when I'm spending the least time on it. Like this is the thing about Twitter that I'm realizing is like you don't actually have to go on Twitter to grow on Twitter. You can completely you can completely grow on Twitter off the app. And what I mean by that is like when you're spending your time like having life experiences, reading books, listening to podcasts, like you're that's where you're coming up with the ideas for Twitter. You're not really coming up with ideas scrolling the timeline. And something that put in really weird perspective for me was one of my friends, Talon Simmons. He's a ghostwriter. He works with Dakota. He says in the past year he's only scrolled the timeline like twice, like in the whole year. And so that like really put things in perspective for me. Like, okay, you don't actually you really have to go on the app. So now I do. Like I'd say I probably go on for like in terms of like answering messages and replying to comments and all that, I'd say I probably go on for like an hour a day. But like I probably scroll the timeline maybe like once or twice a week. Um, just because I want to focus, like I want my attention to be very, very focused on like what I really think is more beneficial. And for me, that's like I'd rather have my attention focused on like reading a book or like having a conversation with somebody in real life than scrolling the timeline.
Oh my God, I'm feeling so ashamed right now because I started
Wait, no,
off
no.
with
How much do you go on?
so I started off with 10 minutes and now I'm on hours on Twitter. It's so
It's
addictive.
addicting. It's so addicting. And like there's days where I'm on it for hours, hours, hours. So I completely feel you, but like I'm realizing more and more like the more you can detach from it, the better like your mental health, your quality of life is. Like because I'll give an example. Like the other week, I put out a thread about Jordan Peterson, one of the people I look up to, psychologist, and got a lot of hate comments because he's a kind of a polarizing, controversial figure. and it was starting to mess with my head. It was like, damn, like, and it went crazy viral, like 1 million views. Which like it feels like a lot of pressure, like a lot of attention is on you, like all the eyes in the world are on you, is what it feels like. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna turn my phone off. And so I spent the rest of that weekend, Saturday and Sunday, didn't go on Twitter. Like I was in San Francisco walking around and not a single person knew my name. And it was like kind of a refresher. Like Twitter's cool, but it's not real life. Like even though it feels like everybody's looking at you, like nobody knows who you are, which is cool. I like that.
True. We need to get reality checks like that.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Because like when you're living in this basically this virtual reality in the Twitter sphere, like reality gets distorted. Like we get in these echo chambers where it feels like all the attention is on what you're doing and like everybody's doing the same thing. But then you go out in the real world and it's like, okay, it's not like this at all.
Mhm. Okay, so I wanted to talk about a thing, and it's about motivation. I know discipline over motivation any day, but like
Yeah,
say I'm doing my evening walk, okay, and every day when you're walking, you tend to get bored, right? So
right.
one hack that I found out is if I keep watching people working out, like shorts, YouTube
Yeah.
shorts, it
Yeah.
makes me my speed increases and I'm able to complete the workout faster.
Yeah.
So if you had to draw a parallel like that from fitness to writing, what would that be in terms of motivation?
It's a good question. And I'm gonna give the cop out answer. Like it's about discipline. It's not about motivation. Like I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but it is true. There's a great book for anybody out there that struggles with like sitting down and doing the work. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And he basically breaks it down into two categories. Like there's the amateur and there's the professional. So the amateur only sits down and writes when he feels like it, when he feels inspiration and motivated, which might be like once every couple days. It might be a couple days at a time and then a couple days rest. But the professional will sit down every single day and write no matter how he feels. And that's the difference, I think, between the people who become great writers, like the greatest book writers out there and authors, which is like to a different level than Twitter. But even on Twitter, like I think the people who can just sit down and write every single day, despite if they feel like it or not, like those are the people that are going to have the consistent compounding momentum over time.
Hmm.
Sorry, that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but
No, I was
that's
just like, it's just like investing in certain sense. If you're like investing in stocks, you just have
yeah,
to do it and
right.
let time take the effect on it.
Exactly, because like let's take the stock example. Sometimes the market is going to be down, sometimes it's going to be up. That's out of your control. Motivation is out of your control too, I would say. So like the only thing that's in your control is just discipline. So it's like showing up every day to write, showing up every day to go to the gym, showing up every day to invest like a certain portion of your paycheck in stocks or investments. And it's doing that over time will result in compounded gains in the long run, but it's hard to see that in the moment.
Yeah. And when you even write down the formula for compound interest, it's the time that's the most important variable in it.
Right. Because that's the is that the exponential variable?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. Are you into math? Like are you a numbers person?
not really. I was,
No?
but I'm not.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I never thought about it in an equation way, but that's such a good way to look at it.
So let's say if I'm a fitness person, like a fitness coach, and I'm trying to write down about it on Twitter. So let's say I can take two, three niches, say pillars, if I had to write about it. Can be food, it can be workout, and it can be mindset, because these are three things that people struggle with, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
say when you're a writer, when you have to bring in your expertise, how can you bring in your content pillars? How can you bifurcate what is that you want to write about?
Yeah, that's another good question. So I think Dan Coe talks about this a lot in his course, The 2 Hour Writer. Like when you have these pillars, you can break them into subsets. So like let's say mindset. Like it's kind of broad to just write about mindset for fitness, but if you break down like the different aspects of mindset, like how can you practice emotional control? How can you practice discipline? So like maybe a subset of mindset is like daily journaling or like daily meditation or like consuming the right podcast or audiobooks. And then you can break down these pillars, as you say, into like more and more subsections. And that's where you can get a lot of content ideas. I don't like, I think I'm unconventional in this aspect. Like, I don't really operate like that. Like, I kind of just write whatever comes to mind. And I don't, this could change. Like, I don't know if this is good in the long run, because I'm kind of just pursuing my curiosity and following my interests. But like, to be perceived as like that authority or expert in your niche, like, you need to really hammer in on some points. And I think I'm working to that point. I don't think I'm there yet.
Hmm.
But for me, it's more so like just follow your curiosity.
Hmm. I think one of the things that can really help is that happened with one of my clients. Uh, she is somebody who's into lifestyle diseases and she treats them. So
Mhm.
we were about to niche down the content as to what to be written. And one of the interesting things that we came about is like there were a couple of questions which are common across all her clients. Like if they have diabetes or thyroid or PCOD, like they're not able to sleep, they're not eating properly. So these are common questions, and we started creating content around these questions, and we found a
Yeah.
lot of engagement there.
Yeah, because when you're just targeting a pain point, like that's when people are really going to be most invested. Like this is the interesting thing about Twitter. Like it's basically just understanding human psychology and like understanding like what are people's problems and how can I help alleviate those problems. And I mean, maybe you're not doing it through words and through writing, but at least you're giving them like a guiding light towards a better future in a way. So yeah, it's like
Yeah.
all psychology, but that makes sense. That's a smart way to do it. Like just analyzing like questions and pain points and making content directly based off that. So that's smart.
Some of the content creators I was following on Instagram, whenever they feel a block like that, they just
Yeah.
add like a Q&A tab on their stories and they take content from people on their feed. So they create content around it as well.
That is really smart. I might steal that. I
So let
might,
me
I'm gonna write that down and steal it because that is really smart.
let me give you an example that we did. So one of my clients, she was coming up with her book, okay, and we were really confused about which cover should we finalize. So we did like an informal poll on her Instagram, which cover are the audiences liking, and then
Mhm.
we ran a Facebook ad across the similar lookalike audiences. And whichever got the maximum engagement, we picked that one. And that got like massive results in terms of sales.
Yeah, that's such a smart way to look at it. I mean, like that's the number one principle that they talk about in marketing. And I'm speaking out of turn here. Like I don't know much about this stuff, but I know like the number one thing in marketing is like talk to your customers, like figure out what they like, who they are, what are their pain points, like what are they seeking to satisfy. And so if you kind of take that mindset in terms of like marketing your own content on Twitter in a way like by asking questions. That is such a smart way to look at things. It's cool how like marketing or like sales or something, it's all interdisciplinary. Like it goes into like writing a book or writing on Twitter or like selling a product or selling a service. Like it's all applicable.
Like yesterday, I don't know if you follow Jeff Su, he's a productivity guru. Um,
Mhm. I do
and
not. No.
he gives like very actionable steps on YouTube. So
Hmm.
he was creating some sort of a video on productivity only, and he's coming up with that. So he did an informal poll like this on his stories where he created two thumbnails for YouTube videos, and he asked which thumbnail are people liking, and whichever
Yeah.
they voted up, he selected that YouTube thumbnail.
It's smart. It's just he's split testing, he's experimenting. It's kind of like we were going back to at the start of the conversation with tweets. It's like treat them all as experiments and like take the data and use it. So like that makes complete sense with the YouTubes as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so give me like a basic optimization guide on how to like optimize your profile on Twitter, since that is the first step people interact with.
Yeah, so I'd say the number one thing is like if somebody clicks on your profile, they should easily be able to like tell if you're a creator or not. And it's
Hmm.
pretty easy to say. Like
Okay.
in your bio, I'm gonna pull up my bio, but like you should have a couple key pillars. So I would say like, well, then the first thing is like get a clean headshot. Like it does matter. And there's this principle in psychology called the halo effect,
Mm-hmm.
where people basically will assign certain character traits or attributes on you based on your image. And maybe it sounds shallow, but it's just how human nature works. So like get a clean picture, like people will perceive you as an authority or in a better way. Get a banner that like matches that picture. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be anything like in particular. Like mine is like koi fish in a yin and yang logo because I love the yin yang, and it just kind of matched like my aesthetic, and like it really like it doesn't serve that much of a purpose, but I just like it. In terms of like the actual bio, I'd say like you have like 10 seconds to convert somebody from like a passive looker to like an active follower of your content. So tell them like who you are. Maybe a transformation I think is huge. So like mine says D1 football player turned writer and podcaster. Like get something that will like catch people's attention. Maybe you're, let's go back to a fitness coach because it's just an easy example. Like you could say like overweight, like 300-pound person turned like ultra marathon runner. Like that is a eye-catching bio. Maybe in the second line you can say like what you write about. So my second line is like I'm writing about self-improvement, psychology, and mindset. So then people have more of a insight into like, okay, he's a writer and podcaster. Like, what does he talk about? Oh, he talks about these things. And then my last thing kind of promotes my current like service, which is audience builder and ghostwriter. But it could that last line could be anything. It could be promoting your product or anything. And then I'd say have a link in there that links to your other stuff. Like if you have a newsletter, if you have a podcast, make a link tree, like put it in there, and then people will come across your profile, click on it. So yeah, I'd say just the number one thing is like find people who already have figured it out and just basically emulate what they do, but with your own little touch on it.
Hmm. Makes sense. And like, people have these crazy notions about who to engage with, how many people do you engage with. Do you think that really matters, or is it something that matters like when you're growing to a certain initial followers and then it just fades away?
Yeah, so I'd say it's like find what it is you're interested in and then start to connect with people within that niche. So let's say
Mm.
you really like online business and writing and you like Dakota Robertson, like follow Dakota, comment on his stuff, but also see who else is commenting on his stuff. See what other smaller accounts are commenting and doing the same as you, then connect with them and engage with them. So I'd say like it's pretty important to find people around your size to like become friends with and grow with. Um there's this mentorship principle where it's like have a couple like have three different tiers of mentors. Have people above you you look up to. So for me it's like Dan Co, Dakota, etc. Have some people with you who are growing with you, and I have a couple friends who I'm in group chats with who we're all growing together at the same time, like Matt, Mick, like Fernando, Tyler, like just to name a few. There's more. And then also have some people below you who you can serve as that mentor for, so then you can really understand and distill your knowledge. Like this podcast is actually so valuable for me because it's like testing if I really know this stuff, like how to grow on Twitter. And it's like, can I explain to somebody who maybe isn't on Twitter at all? And I think if you can explain things to people who have no idea the background, like that's when you actually know it. So I don't think I'm there yet, but I'm getting there.
Oh no, I really got some key takeaways from this podcast. So I'm definitely implementing them on my Twitter journey.
That's good
Um,
to hear. That's good to hear.
so the most important question, how do you make your first $10,000 using Twitter?
See, another thing
Oh,
I'm not qualified to talk about
you
because
are. Just don't doubt yourself.
I haven't done it quite yet, but I'm on the path to doing it. But what I would say is like I think the first, and this is what Dan Coe talks about, he's like, find a skill that is high ticket. So let's say you are somebody that sells a really low ticket service business. I can't think of an example, but let's say you value your service at like $50 a person. You're going to need 200 people to hit that $10,000. That's a lot of people to convince to buy your service. What if you flip that and have like a really high ticket offer? So like I'm doing ghostwriting. And so ghostwriting, you only need to sign like 3 or 4 clients to hit that number. So find a skill. It could be ghostwriting, it could be Facebook ads, it could be anything. And find a market that there's people that can pay. Let's say you're selling video game coaching. Like your target market of like 15-year-old kids, they're not going to be able to pay. Maybe they want to, but they're not going to be able to pay you $2,000 a month to do it. However, if you're a ghostwriter and you're targeting like high performing entrepreneurs and CEOs, for them to fork over a couple $1,000s to you a month is not much at all for them. Now, for me, it would be a lot, but for them, it's not. So it's like find a market where people can actually pay and combine it with a high ticket skill where you only need a couple clients to get to that number. So that's kind of like the path I'm going down. And again, I'm not there yet, but it's kind of the blueprint that I'm following.
Okay, so like for example, if I get started on being a ghostwriter today,
Mm-hmm.
so how do I meet the right people? How do I find such founders who want this service on Twitter?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is like that networking aspect again. So like connect with a bunch of ghostwriters on Twitter. Like start to reach out to them. Like I'm in a group chat with like 10 ghostwriters who were all kind of in the same spot. And so we just help each other. Like we come up with potential offers, we come up with strategies for growing, we help each other if we need help, which is awesome. Um, but I think a big way to land these clients is honestly just referrals, like word of mouth referrals or like outbound leads. Now, sometimes this is the advantage of growing a personal brand, like in growing your own following, is the leads will actually be inbound at some point. Like people will see that you have this brand and they'll reach out to you and ask rather than you having to reach out. Now, at the start, and this is what I'm working through right now, you're gonna have to do cold outreach, like cold DMs, cold emails, cold call yourself, which is hard, but you can offer your services for free at first. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. So like if you have a potential lead or client that you've been in the DMs with, you could say, hey, can I write you a thread for free? If you like it, like, would you be interested in working together? And then you write the thread, maybe it performs well, maybe it doesn't, and then you go from there. But I'd say like to start off, like you might have to give away some value for free, and really put the effort in like cold DMing and cold emailing. And I'm saying that to myself because like I haven't done it enough as I should.
So, post this video if somebody wants to start on their Twitter journey. What are the first five steps they can take to get started on their journey?
First 5 steps.
Yeah.
Okay. Step number one, post just one tweet. Like the first tweet will be the hardest to send because, well, for 2 reasons. Maybe you already have an account and you already have people following you, like from your hometown or something, and you're going to be scared of what they think. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. They're not thinking about you as much as you think they are. Or if you're starting from scratch, like that first tweet is going to feel really meaningless. It's not. Like, just so post one tweet. I'd say number two, show up every day. Like post at least a tweet a day. Like have the mindset. I love this quote by Dakota. It's like if you don't tweet, you die. And so there was like you metaphorically die on Twitter. You don't actually die. But I I remember like back when I was starting this past school year, like there was days where I was like, I don't want to do this at all. But I just sent one tweet because that just keeps your momentum going. If you take a day where you don't tweet, like you're as good as dead, like in terms of this long journey. It's a long journey. Just show up every day. Um, Three, start connecting with people like as soon as possible. like hop on Zoom calls, like ask to hop on Zooms, phone calls, coffee chats, whatever, and just start to make friends. Like one of the first people I ever met on Twitter was a guy named Jason Levin, and he's a ghostwriter for like venture capitalists in the tech, crypto, Web3 space. And I had no idea what I was doing at first. And this dude was generous enough to hop on like a 30-minute call with me. And from there, like he's actually like outsourced some projects to me. He came on my podcast. Like he was the one who inspired me to start a podcast. So like make friends. Friends are huge. Number 3. Number 4, I would say comment and engage under like bigger account stuff. So then they kind of know who you are and like send them DMs. Like ask them to hop on a call. They might say yes, they might say no. But who cares? Like just shoot the shot. And then 5, I would say is like change your mindset from passive consumer to active creator. And what I mean by that, I might have to tweet that. What I mean by that is like when you're scrolling the timeline, like it's easy to just see what other people are doing and just like it and comment and like, oh, I like this post, I don't like this post. But like change your mindset to being like super curious. Like, okay, wait, why did this thread do so good? Or like, why did this tweet get no engagement? Or like, why does this guy get so many likes and comments on his tweets? And like really take it all as data and figure out like what works and why it works. And then you can start to implement and understand and put that into your own content. So I would say those are the 5 things.
Okay. Just on a side note, are you in love with Dakota and Huberman?
Oh gosh. Hopefully they don't see this. No, like it's honestly like it's just people I've taken a lot of inspiration from. I was so obsessed with Huberman last year during school. Like I consumed so much of his content. Um and then Dakota recently, I'm just in his cohort, in his coaching cohort. So like everything he's saying is resonating because we're having like multiple Zoom calls a week. But yeah, like those guys, I mean, Huberman and Dakota are on a bit of different levels. No offense, Dakota. But well, Dakota might be making more money, but that's a whole nother debate. But yeah, I think like taking inspiration from people ahead of you is so important. But that's funny. That's a good question.
You keep mentioning them in your answers, so I thought maybe.
They're just on top of mind. I've been listening to them lately. That's probably why.
The
Not really. Just like follow me. My at is Jack Moses 0 on Twitter. Have a YouTube channel now where I'm uploading podcasts, just the Jack Moses podcast. I think the name is. And yeah, like that's pretty much it. I really appreciate you doing this. You've like the questions you asked were really thought provoking, and I could tell you prepped a lot. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.